You're listening to the British Baseball Podcast. And joining me on today's episode of the British Baseball Podcast, I'm very excited to have alongside me Mr. John Boyd, who's the CEO of Baseball Softball UK. John, how are we?
Hi, Matt. Very well, thanks. Very well. How's lockdown up in Salford?
Warm, very warm, which is why I look a nice, glossy, shiny shell of a man. I'm not normally this sweaty, even though I am a bald man. I don't normally shimmer this well in the light, but yeah, we're getting there. Keep myself hydrated, keep myself busy. And Manchester baseball is finally allowed back into training as well, so that was fun last Sunday. Yeah, really good to be back out. How about yourself?
Yeah, very, very similar. Very warm today. I did manage to get out and have my run, but yeah, probably wasn't the wisest thing. It's been such a weird year, hasn't it? All this unexpected stuff and just having to deal with things that we didn't think we'd have to deal with, like working from home and homeschooling and keeping kids entertained, and then a long, hot summer without any baseball. It's just tough.
Yeah. There's always so many Lego structures you can build with the same 12 blocks before things start to get a bit samey. So thank you for agreeing to come on the show. We've got quite a lot of listener questions to get through. It's become, I think it's the second most popular episode I'll be doing with listener questions next to the Johnny and Josh show that came on. So before we get into those, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and how you got interested in baseball?
Well, how I got interested in baseball? Well, it's a very long story, so I'll give you the potted version. I was born in South Africa, into apartheid South Africa, and in the height of apartheid, one of the things that my quite liberal family quite encouraged was that I played with some of the kids from around the neighborhood, and included in that were some of the kind of staff from different households. And there was a black boy from down the road called Kerry. And I remember quite vividly that Kerry and I used to play all the time in the garden. And at one point, it was so hot, like it is now. I said, "Oh, let's go to the municipal pool." And that was the first time Kerry sat me down and said, "Oh, do you know what? I can't. No, I'll talk to my mother. She'll be fine. I've got swimming trunks here. We can go. I know the swimming pool. We'll go." And he's like, "No, I can't." And I remember my mom having to sit me down, and that was my first realization of difference in color and the apartheid regime. Anyway, that was a digression, but Kerry got me into playing baseball. One day he brought over this stick, and he had put some string around it and some glue and made it into a makeshift stick to a bat. And we would play, and he would throw this tennis ball at me. We had a garage door, and there was this makeshift strike zone, and I'd hit it. And then my mother saw me doing that and got me involved in the local club for a year before we left. And when we left in 1988, it was still the height of apartheid. We moved to Windsor, and to be honest, I kind of moving into this culture, if you can imagine it, all of the South Africanness of me was beaten out of me in a primary school playground in Windsor. And when I got into the different sports, I couldn't really find anything. Playing football in the middle of winter in shorts in the mud just was alien to me from what I did in South Africa. So I eventually went for a trip to see my sister, who was doing a postgraduate in Northwestern. She could definitely got all the brains in the family. She's a Fulbright scholar. And anyway, so she takes me off to the Cubs to Wrigley Field for 2 games, and I'm in. I'm all out. This is the best thing ever. I remembered it. I came back. I was buzzing. I just loved it. I was sitting in the bleachers for the games, and in Wrigley there were two bleacher bums with these two guys in front of us, and it took up the same space as 5 of us. It was just this authentic experience of hot dogs and yelling and Americana, and I loved it. So I came back, and I was like, okay, talking to my parents, I'm in. I want to do this. And I remember my mum coming up to me and saying, okay, you've got 3 options. You can play for a club that's 20 miles down the road from Windsor in Reading, the Reading Royals. Okay. They have a youth program. They're going to the national championships this September. Okay, great. So they're going off to the national championships. That's interesting. Great. What else? Well, you can go and join the American school in Switzerland, TASIS. They have an international program that is open to anyone. So you can join it up to the age of 14. You don't have to be a member of the school. It's pre-JV. So you can join that, and they play on Saturdays, and they're down in Thorpe, so it's 10 miles down the road. Okay, great. Or you could set up your own team with your friends. And I said, okay, great. And she said, so which one? And I said, oh, you want me to choose? So we ended up doing all three. And I remember going off to meet this guy, Jack Fagura, at Reading Royals, and he was a very hard South African guy as well, coincidentally. And he took me off to the first game up at, it was in Birmingham. There was a national championship at the Tally Ho Centre, and I got to the thing, and I had another encounter with another bloody South African, who was a guy called Ted Gerald Thessing. Now, Ted is was one of the members of the British Baseball Federation, but he was umpiring the game, and he was behind us, and he looked over him and he said, hey you on the bench, off, because I was not in uniform yet, and I wasn't in the full uniform. So I effectively, the only time I've been ejected from a baseball game was before I was even a member of the team. Anyway, so that was the Reading Royals. They folded after that year, or the year after, and I didn't really play for them more after that experience, not because of all the dodgy South Africans. And then I also went and played at Tassis, which was the American school. And I remember going down to Thorpe, and I'd go there on a Saturday, and I had some understanding because I played T-ball already. I could kind of hold my own within the teams, but I was fundamentally learning the game. And I'd learn stuff on Saturday, and I'd go back on the Sunday and teach my friends at school. And I really found that kind of getting out into the school, recruiting my friends, organizing the club, I got them all together, and we were picking a team name. Sorry, it's a slight digression, but I remember I was determined that this would be the Windsor Cubs, the Windsor Cubs, the Windsor Cubs, and I got outvoted in our first committee meeting on the school playground, and it was turned into the Bears because they didn't want to be seen to be too soppy. So we became the Windsor Bears from that, and we formed, and we played on the home park in Windsor, which is right under the castle. The castle's in the background. We started with a tennis ball and a glove or two, and we gradually got all of our equipment together and started playing. And our first game was against the Tonbridge Bobcats, who had just formed their first youth team. So Margaret Borley was the elderly stateswoman of British baseball, and I was this little young punk of an upstart. And it was these two very misplaced people within British baseball organising youth teams at exactly the same time. And our first game was against Alex Malahudis and the Carters, and it was a big rivalry that stemmed from that. And basically, that's how I got into it, and that's the hook. But what I was saying was, I found interestingly that my ability to, my running of the club was an outlet for me. So while I was this South African kid, I didn't have much that the British culture I couldn't hold my own with them. But as soon as I became, and this was my nickname at school, John Boyd Baseball, or often said John Boyd Baseball, teasingly but also fondly, I had something to do and something to kind of connect with a lot of people and a reason to speak to anyone. So it really helped me kind of find my feet. But that's how I got into it.
So how long did the Windsor Cubs last for? The Windsor Bears last for?
So I did that for 16 years, and by the end of it, I was running the entire club program, which was it went from the one team to two teams. Then had a little league and a youth program and a younger age group. Then both had little leagues, and then we had a T-ball program. Then we introduced an adult program, and then we had two adult teams. And by the end of it, I think the kind of highlight for me in terms of the whole program was the number of visits we had to youth championships, and that flow of we had quite a few national championships under our belts through really kind of committed and quite well integrated British and American kind of kids in the program. And finally in 2003 we won the National League, we won the Final Four National Championship, and we went off to Europe and won in the club competition B pool, which was the first time that I think the club's been promoted into the A pool, and as far as I'm aware, the first time that kind of triple crown's been won in British baseball. So yeah, I did that for 16 years, but I burnt out around 2005-06, and I just needed, I mean, a lot of that was I was already working for Baseball Soccer UK, and I just couldn't, I was living in central London, I couldn't get out to Windsor 4 times a week, including both days of the weekend.
Yeah.
and putting in all the money that I put in. So yeah, I did that for 16 years. A club carried on for a few years after me, but it's living on in spirit now and in the hearts of those people that are still around.
And how old were you when you started that team?
I was 12.
Love it. Brilliant. Superb. Most 12-year-olds where I live just smash up bus stops. And that's like, how I use your time wisely. You could be starting a baseball team for you and your mates. You've already got baseball bats. Use them properly.
Oh, it won't surprise you to know that the upstart nature of my 12-hood years is genetic. So my 8-year-old is quite competent and very confident. And I'm encouraging her to do the same and told her that she's doing it 4 years ahead of me. So she's on a little bit of a mission to set up her own club now. We'll see how that goes, but if it happens, then it'll certainly be her drive on it and a little bit of my direction in the background.
That's lovely. Brilliant stuff. So how did you get involved in baseball in this country then, in terms of, you started off in the BBF before you went into the BSUK? Yeah. How'd you progress?
So, I mean, there are not many 12-year-olds that speak at their first AGM of the British Baseball Federation. I didn't intend to. I was sitting at the back, but I had to put my hand up and say something about how I wanted to correct some of the things that were being said about the perception that British kids don't want to play baseball. And that wasn't my experience. And I said actually, my experience is that when you put a glove on the wrong hand and you tell a kid that they're going to hit a round ball with a round bat and run around a diamond in a circle, they're kind of captured by that. That's unique, that's different. And that's even before you kind of tell them about the coolness of the MLB brand or the sport itself. So my experience was that kids really do enjoy playing this. They might have other commitments, it might be other things, but fundamentally it's the infrastructures, the adults, the coaches, the quality of the session that might put them off, not the sport itself. And I remember saying our biggest challenge is we can't find a coach. So can that be helped? And anyway, so I went around, I would talk at AGMs. I went through the BBF handbook. This was all analog in those days, paper copies and telephones. And there wasn't a person in that BBF handbook that I hadn't phoned and asked for help with coming to umpire our games or help with equipment or whatever. And so I was quite well known all the way through my teens. By the time I got to university, it was a fairly natural step for me to try and organize a university team. And with that came the pretty quick responsibility of organizing all of university baseball, which I did, and ended up on the British Baseball Federation board while I was at university. So as a 20-year-old, I was on that board and connected in. And then out of the back of that, I came out of university, was recruited by Major League Baseball to do some work for them. When I say recruited, that's how they made me feel. I think what they actually felt was a bit of sympathy and encouragement was in order here. But anyway, I went in and worked with Major League Baseball in the summer of 1999. I was working to support the Play Ball World Series, which was their youth initiative with the British Baseball Federation. I was working to support the national championships that they were supporting with the British Baseball Federation run at Brighton. My last job was kind of doing the grunt work of an audit of the British Baseball Federation, British Softball Federation in terms of their processes in order to create this joint venture that ultimately became Baseball Softball UK. So my journey through this was soon after I'd done that, I applied for a job at Baseball Softball UK, knowing those processes and audits and knowing how British baseball ran. I got the job of operations manager, and that was in January 2000, and I've been in the company since.
Do you think that your experiences as a kid involved in baseball have affected the way that you are now in BSUK in terms of running it? Like, you've noticed things like the challenges and the struggles you had as a kid, and it's maybe influenced the way you've worked to make sure that doesn't happen to anybody else?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I remember when I was first setting up, I was very green, and enthusiastic. I mean, I had the kind of enthusiasm that you have around this podcast and the sport. And, I was very green, but I didn't know where to go for help. And I was not shy either. So one of the times I picked up the phone and I reached a guy called Joe Walker. Now, Joe Walker was then playing for the Scottish Amicable League for the Southern Tigers. He was a catcher. He was an American with a big nose, and a very big mouth as well, metaphorically and the latter anyway. He somehow took to giving me some help, and he was the guy on the end of the phone who, if I got stuck, I could phone, and he really helped me. And from my perspective, that help, and also the help that came from a local authority development officer called Sean Kearns, who helped me with the constitution and setting up a bank account. Those two people had such a fundamental kind of guide to getting some of the basics right for Windsor in my early days. And when I've gone through this process of understanding how we support clubs and what we do, and even whether we put money into equipment or into staff, it's always been my belief that the biggest thing we can do is help facilitate those enthusiastic people, help make sure that those people have a level of enthusiasm, know where to go, what to write in their constitution, how to get a bank account set up, how to create a website, how to get through those early stages, how to connect into the local authority or raise some funds. And Joe said to me at one point, "Why don't you go get some sponsorship?" And I was like, "What? Walk the high street, go shop to shop, tell them who you are, be confident, say this is what you've got." And I did, and I got almost nowhere for a couple of days, and then I walked into a restaurant called Uncle Sam's, an American restaurant, and the guy gave me £250, this little punk of a kid, 12-year-old, on the spot to have his name on here. And I got another sports shop to give me £50, and I raised a little bit of money for the club. And it was little things like that that really helped. And did Joe set up my club? No, I did. But could I have done it without Joe? No, absolutely not. So that ethos has been very much the heart. And actually in this week when we're launching the development charter, that's very much at the heart of what I envisage us as an organization being able to do for those grassroots organization clubs across the country.
Great stuff. Got Paul Vernon to thank for his question. He says, BSUK setup, what is it? What does it mean? What's it about? And how does it work?
Oh, Paul, you know the answer to that. You're around when it happened. So Baseball Software UK, the concept fathers of Baseball Software UK were a couple of people at Major League Baseball. James Pearce, who was on the British Baseball Federation board and then went on to run the World Baseball Classic as tournament director, and also Clive Russell, who was the director of Major League Baseball in EMEA and really set it up in the late 90s and all the way through the 2000s and into the mid teens, 2000 teens. Those two were really behind this concept of a joint venture between the two federations that they were working with at the time. So Major League Baseball was investing in youth programs for British baseball. They were investing in softball tournaments to engage a population of softball players at the time. And they said, actually, if we bring this together, we have some commonality of effort. We have a single infrastructure. We have a single staff team. We have an ability to really do three kind of pillars of work. One was realize the government investment that is the potential for government investment that is out there within sport. The lottery was just coming online, the national lottery. The second, which I think we've done very well, by the way. The second one is realize the kind of collective power of bringing the infrastructures together. One sport in Outlook means you've got one infrastructure, you've got one finance team, you've got one development team, you've got one team looking at facilities, you've got one team looking at talent, and it's all in lots of efficiencies of doing that. And I think we've done that pretty well too. And the third one was kind of realize commercial sponsorship opportunities by presenting sports together. And look, if I'm honest, I don't think we've done that well enough yet. I think there's still some potential in that area. Mainly if we, it centers around being able to present a big enough community. And some of our realization around the commercial opportunity there is about, actually, we've got to grow before we become interesting to companies and interesting to companies investing in us in a substantial and sustainable way. So those are the pillars that we were set up on. Look, 1999 was a pretty interesting year. Major League Baseball was saying to the baseball community, the softball community, you need to create this organization. There was some momentum. We had created a joint magazine as a interesting kind of toe dip into working together called Double Play. And what we learned from Double Play was, it's very similar to COVID. People have different perspectives. In COVID, someone said to me at one point, this whole thing around COVID-19 is when everyone says we're in the same boat, we're not in the same boat. We're in the same storm. We've got very different boats. And that rings true for the outlook as well for where British baseball and British softball were in 1999. British baseball was ready to kind of take over this and be the big powerhouse in this collaborative venture, and softball was reticent about being taken over, and kind of there were some kind of concerns in there, and we decided that we would set up Baseball Softball UK, but we would effectively not formally merge the three organizations. But we did it in everything but name. The two organizations that continue to exist, but we had one bank account, we had one set of articles, we had a council governing Baseball Softball UK, and we got going. And Major League Baseball pooled all of their resources. We pooled the staff from the BBF and from the BSF into one infrastructure. We set up an office in London, which Major League Baseball effectively paid for without us having to pay for it. So we got a Charlotte Street West 1 in the middle of Media Land office, free of charge for I think 15 years before Major League Baseball even asked us to contribute. Free internet, free computers, free phones, everything. And they were really good to us in getting us going in order to have this professional front for the sports to intersect with government, to intersect with the sports funders, to intersect with the community as a whole, and to try and create a commonality between baseball and softball or one community.
Yeah, cool. What is the CEO position all about at BSUK? What's like your day-to-day workings?
Oh gosh,
Feels
my
like a job
day-to-day
interview,
working.
this one.
Yeah, it does. What can I
Sorry.
bring to the role? Look, it's a very interesting question. It spans from understanding why we can and can't have a water supply on a dirt infield in Farnham Park, all the way through to the complexities of safeguarding responsibilities across sport and how they might impact on clubs' red tape perceptions and create some barriers into the sport, all the way through to government policy. I think the reality is that in some ways, I think the best way to describe it is to talk about some of my peers. So the peers that I intersect with, the CEOs of other sports, range from the chief executive of Badminton England and England Hockey through to the chief executive of an unfunded body that's called UK Ultimate Frisbee, basically. And that intersection is sharing experiences, understanding how the sport can move forward, what some of the challenges are, making sure that how we operate is up to scratch for what the government will expect, what the sports will expect, and how we optimize what we do. And I think there are a lot of commonalities between each of the organizations, but fundamentally my job is to make sure that baseball and softball, who are much bigger sports in many other countries and much smaller sports in other countries, but baseball and softball can walk shoulder to shoulder with the established sports in this country. And I think, over the last 20 years, through all of the efforts of the founding chief executive of Baseball Softball UK, Bob Fromer, Jenny, who was joint chief executive, Jenny Fromer, with me for many years, and the whole rest of the team has been to try and make sure that the front and the impression that people have of Baseball Softball UK, whether they're the first-time player or another administrator of another sport or a government official or a funder, is positive and can be seen to be a really good thing. So that fundamentally is the job as I see it. But yeah, I mean, it's at the moment it's sitting at a desk and trying to make sure that everyone's happy and that everyone understands where we're going and that we're aligning everyone in one common direction. But yeah, fundamentally it's that interface between the sports and the wider world.
That's cool. Another question I wanted to ask when I was doing my research on it, I said you're quite involved in like Little League, and it also brings on from a question from Charlie Batho, who's plays for the Bruins. He's asked as well if there's any advice you can give about starting a youth program. I'm presuming that's at the Bruins. But yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about your involvement in Little League? I mean, as a parent myself, my little one's 3, and I've seen how much he likes playing baseball in the back garden. I would never sort of push him into it, but if I can see that he's enjoying it, I'd like him to follow it, and I'd like him to continue it because I like playing it with him, and hopefully we can see where it progresses. So yeah, what is it about Little League and then Charlie's question as well?
Little League, I've had some pretty cool experiences in the sport, and they're things that I feel very humbled by. various different things and experiences that are just, you know, at some point and over a beer, I'm sure I'd be more less embarrassed about sharing. But out of all of them, the coolest thing that I've been able to do in my whole time within the sport is sit on the board of directors of Little League International. That was really afforded to me. I think I was voted onto it by my peers across Europe, so other Little League organizers across Europe, and it was a complete honor for me to represent them on the board and to be a board director. I think Little League is an incredible organization. It is the world's largest sporting organization, and it has at its heart that very fundamental ethos of player development, of the importance. They fundamentally are not a baseball and softball organization. They're an organization about the child. They're the ones that pioneered safety helmets in baseball. They're the ones that have really kind of pushed this positive coaching environment, that kind of constructive coaching, and making sure that there's a positive and really strong coach at the heart of the youth program. And they've continued to be that. I think they often get the power and the importance of Little League often gets lost behind the business or the perceived business of Little League, the Little League World Series, which is so powerful. I mean, to have games of 10 to 12-year-olds played in a stadium that seats 25,000 people, including all the grass bank, and that gets a major broadcast deal with ESPN and broadcast across America as an institution, is absolutely phenomenal. And when I'd say that to people in this country, they're like, watching 10 to 12-year-olds, you know, that feels alien to people in Britain. And I think it often gets lost behind that. But the power for me of Little League, I love the Little League World Series, but the power is really its local programming and its focus. And this is the translation point. And it speaks a little bit to Charlie's question. It's focus on setting up a local program. So at the heart of Little League is a local league. It's played on generally one field. It is based in the community. It is based within the commonality of your friends and the people whose houses you go around to. And, you know, when Elliot's a bit older, you'll see how many, and I'm sure you're already seeing it, but how many of your neighbors you interact with them and you socialize with them, if they're ever allowed to socialize with people again. But you'll see that kind of community, right? And Little League's at the heart of that. It's this thing to do, and it's a thing to do together. And I think that fundamentally, when I was looking at how we can position youth baseball and youth fast pitch in particular in this country as community programs, if we try and replicate the same club model as it exists in football or in hockey or in cricket, I think we're going to be on a sticky wicket, if you pardon the expression. I think we're going to be in a place where well, hang on a second, we don't have a nearby club to play. If you set up in Salford, you got Manchester, but you know, you've got a couple other places you can go. It's still a distance to travel. And I think the travel and that idea of home and away becomes a barrier. If you concentrate all the efforts, instead of putting the efforts into travel teams and into getting parents to take kids and signing forms, and instead of putting all those efforts into taking your one little team away, you put it into your own program and you build your program in as big as you can. You get so much more benefit. So you end up, instead of the home and away standard, you've got 4 teams playing at that same standard in your one field. And that's where I think the growth will come from. And that fundamentally, that's why I was and continue to be such a big proponent of Little League. It's that local league concept. For me, it's really not about, you know, the dads getting to live out their egos through their sons, or the kids and the kids being driven towards the Little League World Series. I couldn't care less about that. That's an outcome of a really good program. It's really about that concentration on a local level.
Yeah. So what advice are you giving to Charlie that's with him trying to set up a youth development in Sheffield, or to 20 club as well that are looking to try set up a youth club?
Yeah. I don't want to put you off. It's a big undertaking. It's a lot of time commitment. So make sure you've got the people around you. I have a slide deck of advice that I give to any club wanting to kind of develop, and I've given this presentation to Europe and to clubs in Europe and all the other federations. And my first piece of advice is find someone else like you. find someone else who's enthusiastic and you can hand off some of the responsibility. And their first job is to find someone who will manage and find your volunteers. So that is fundamentally, get people around you who can commit to this. And I jokingly mentioned my daughter kind of doing this, and the advice I gave to her, which is the same as I give to Charlie, is find someone who can set up your website. Find someone who will set up a bank account and run your finances. Find someone who can, if they can't do your logo, they can give a good enough start so that you can contact the baseball outlet who will do a logo for you and set up a team shop for your uniforms. Find someone who can be your equipment manager and make sure that all of your stuff is down there and it's ready to go. And unfortunately now as well, it's COVID cleaned and all that sort of thing. Find someone who can be that interface with the local authority or wherever you're playing is, and then concentrate on making sure that they all know what they're doing, and that they're clear on what they're doing. They know how to do it. They know who to turn to get some advice. And while you're doing that, also speak to Baseball Software UK. Check out our new charter resource that we put online. The development charter has a website. It has a lot of tips about where you can go, and the relationship managers, our development staff, have even further information and resource behind that. So get in touch, and we will do everything we can to make that as easy as possible for you. But it is a lot of work, so make sure you're finding other people who are as passionate, enthusiastic as you are, Charlie.
Yeah, well, knowing the Bruins like I know the Bruins, they're a very determined and driven bunch. I think it won't be long before you see a youth development program thriving from them. Yeah, great bunch of people. Thanks for that. So what do you think your unique skills are, and how they helped you become successful in what you've been doing?
My unique skills. I know the sports. I know baseball in and out. I won't say I'm an expert in baseball. I had a very real moment in my playing career where my sister's gumption arranged a tryout on Wrigley Field when I was 15. And I bottled it. I realized at that point that I wasn't ready. I actually didn't have a career ahead of me. I was on the national team, but I could see my ceiling. So I'm not purporting to be an expert in baseball. I'm not purporting to play at any higher level than what British baseball had to offer. But I know and I love the sport, and I know what makes it tick. And I've coached some very passionate and players who have gone on to good things. So one of them is a familiarity with baseball. I've also embraced softball. I've played fast pitch softball, and I currently continue to play slow pitch softball. So that familiarity with what makes the communities tick, how they operate, who the people are. I think my Facebook profile, my non-baseball and softball friends on there get upset when I tweet too much or Facebook about too much about baseball. But I know so many people in sport and have that familiarity, and I like to think that I'm approachable. Yeah. I had a couple of people pick up the phone to me this week and talk to me about the charter directly while I was working. And the Baseball Software UK is an organization for the sports. We will always be there for the sports. That's our job. And if we ever are not there for the sports and not doing what's in the best interest for baseball and softball together, then that's a very sorry day. But we won't get there, and we certainly won't get there when we're all involved. So I think those are the main things. I'm also long-serving now. I've got the long-serving experience as chief executive of one of the funded sports within Sporting and UK Sport land, and that's given me a lot of experience in how to handle difficult circumstances, how to make sure that we are presenting ourselves well, how to push back sometimes when sometimes the government might Sporting might have different ideas, and how to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward. So those are I think are my key things. But I've been there, I've done it, I do get it, and that can sometimes annoy the staff because I can be pretty opinionated across everything from the water supply at Farnham Park to what our club resources are to how we're promoting our uniform suppliers to everything. So
awesome. You've mentioned throughout the show we're talking about the charter. Before we actually get into the charter itself, what are your favourite memories related to the project?
The charter? Oh, wow. So memories, I mean, we've adopted this new working way across the team, which are called 6-week sprints. And fundamentally, what we're doing is we're going to brief in a project. that has a very clear brief, a very clear outcome, and we're gonna hold ourselves to some pretty energized timeframes about it. And the charter, from broad concept through to delivery, was one of those 6-week sprints across the whole the whole staff team. So memory is like, they came off furlough on the 7th of July, and we've delivered the charter on the 10th of August. That's how quickly we've done this. And look, there are probably things that we will continue to tweak. There are probably things that we will realize we haven't yet got because there's a unique or something that a club raises that we haven't yet, and we'll fix that. That's part of the point. But the work that we put in here is we've created a new website. We've created a whole clear pathway for clubs to access it. We've spoken to all of the different organizations involved in this around the charter itself and around the strategy. We've got such good traction from across baseball and softball that, the great thing about this, and the real energy I've got around this week and last week and the launch of the strategy, is just feels like for the first time in a while that I can genuinely say that the grassroots of British baseball and British softball are very much behind something, regardless of whether they're a member of a certain league or a different program, or whether they're in England, Northern England, Southern England, Southwest Scotland, Wales, or anywhere. So I think fundamentally that my biggest takeaway is this is something that's designed to try and unite everyone and say, it doesn't matter where we are, what we do, we've got a basic innate right to development services and safeguarding services, and we know where we'll get it from, and we'll all work together in trying to grow the participation, the number of people who are enjoying playing our sports.
Awesome. So tell us a bit more about the charter and the strategy that's been released.
Yeah, I'll start with the strategy, if I may. The beginning of last year, our board started kind of looking at our strategy and kind of made some observations around the Played in Every Park strategy, which were broadly that Played in Every Park as a concept was strong. I think it still is, actually, but it's a strong concept around a commitment to increasing participation. But have we got a current document that says, here's our strategy of what we're going to do? And what the board's observation, which I wholly agreed with, was we have a strategy that we're living and breathing, but it's not written down. The work program for staff was very clear. We had key objectives set every year, broken down into every staff member, a golden thread that went through from the board, through me, and into the staff team. But we didn't have a document that if a club said, what's your strategy, we could go, here it is, all in its neat form. So we introduced what we call a strategic review, and we got an independent consultant to come in. Don't worry, it didn't cost a lot of money. I think it was, it wasn't a lot of money. Let's put it that way. It's just a few £1,000s, and we got an independent consultant in, and he did a fantastic job on going across the sport. He interviewed directors of the British Baseball Federation, of the British Softball Federation, of the BSUK board, of the staff team. There was a big survey that went out. There was, interestingly enough, almost half filled out purely by baseball, despite the discrepancy in numbers and the size of softball. Baseball had a really good representation in it. And that kind of deep review uncovered a lot of stuff. It uncovered some of the issues within the sport, some of the really good things, and it was a deep dive into what that was. And on the back of that, part of the deliverable was to make some suggestions about what our strategy looks like. And those suggestions were given to us through the summer of last year. And the board was digesting that and kind of creating a strategic plan out of that. And we, at a number of different points, took the iterations of that strategic plan back to our two members and offered touch points. So we said, here it is, let's talk about it, let's engage. And we continued to do that all the way through this year, and got to the point where we were confident as a BSUK board, we'd run through a legitimate process of consultation, and then we had a strong strategy to launch. We've taken the last couple of weeks before the strategy launch to double check that with people and sense check it and let people know the strategy was coming, and got really good positive feedback from that. And that's why we were able to launch the strategy. What I'd say about the strategy is a lot of people rightly, when we were talking about it and since, have kind of said, yeah, but how? How are you going to deliver this? And the strategy doesn't contain that detail. The how, I think, is certainly something we want to work with the communities in baseball and in fast pitch and in slow pitch to develop. The strategic document isn't about the how. The strategic document is about the what. The what is participation growth. It's a clear prioritization of supporting grassroots organizations, the clubs across the country, to become stronger, to become safer in safeguarding terms and in the way that they deliver the program, and to become sustainable. And our job in that is to support them. It's a clear prioritization of the development of athletes and their journey through the sport. And when I say athletes, I mean they're both in the sense of real athletes and any player who might not regard themselves as an athlete. Which is me at the moment, by the way. Yeah, exactly. At one point, I would have regarded myself as an athlete. I certainly don't now. But it's about players' journey through the sport, making sure that players who are introduced to the sport have a fulfilling experience and have the outlets that they need. And critically as well, that our sports talent development doesn't disenfranchise young people because of their financial means. We also have a key emphasis in there, and I say this in British baseball, but a lot of other people don't understand it, on homegrown players. And the term homegrown players are players that live in this country who come up through our club structure and making sure that they are given as good a shot at making a successful run at their career as they can have. And that might mean making the national team. That might mean making the junior squads, like some of us did. That might mean making a college placement, like so many players are doing in our programs. That might mean playing club baseball in Europe, or it might just be actually, you know what, we had a really good experience and we're going to be the next, coach, or the next person who sets up a softball team in our older age, or the next Charlie Bathrow, any of that. It's about a really good, fulfilling experience and keeping people energized and educated within the sport. And the fourth priority within the strategy is really just about making sure that we're sustainable, so that we don't have to rely on the government investment into the sport. We can multiply that up through just smart things, like the whole thing around Farnham Park is about keeping money in the sport. We're not paying other people to rent our fields, but we're keeping that in the sport, and it goes into the upkeep of the fields. We're not paying Costa to have a sandwich or a cup of coffee. We're paying someone who, the proceeds of which come back into the running of the sport. We're a not-for-profit. We should take advantage of that. And how do we also fundraise? There's some really good discussions about how we fundraise, and I've got some certain people who I'd like to talk to about, society golf days to fundraise, and how we might be able to do some kind of good initiatives to really kind of put some valuable pounds in the pockets of people who need it. So those are the key things. The how will come. I think the key things that I already can see around the how is the first part of the how is we've got to develop sport-specific development plans. This is the nitty-gritty. What are baseball's competition needs, club development needs, youth development needs, school needs, facility needs? How do they differ in Scotland, in Wales, and in England? Do they differ between the north of England, the northeast, the southwest of England, and London? How do we capture that nitty-gritty of what we need as a sport? And developing that, I think this isn't a plan that I want. This is a plan that I think baseball will need and has an opportunity to own. And we can play a role in making sure this happens, but the content of that is not ours to own. If the content of that is the baseball community's to own. And similarly, fast pitch and slow pitch need the same. So we're going to go through a process over the coming months of developing those plans with the community and with anyone that will talk to us. And our starting point will be all the chartered clubs. The charter is a very interesting one, actually. So for some time, we've been struggling with how we're the safeguarding lead for baseball and softball, and that's one of the delegated functions from the British Baseball Federation, the British Softball Federation. And because of that, we have kind of statutory responsibilities to make sure that there are processes and policies in place. But when a lot of the clubs were leaving the BBF and setting up on their own, we had a little bit of a conundrum. We felt actually we can't offer our safeguarding services to them because there's no chain of command. There's no commitment from those clubs to the safeguarding responsibilities, and there's no kind of recourse if they don't follow our safeguarding policies. We don't know who they are. There's no particular contact. So when we were developing the charter, we said, well, let's put together what we can offer as a carrot, which is our development support. We can offer that free of charge, but we get that from our funding that we receive from Sport England and from the money we raise ourselves. And if we couple that with a commitment to the safeguarding responsibilities, then we can also offer that same safeguarding responsibility across the totality of the sport. So suddenly we were able to turn around to clubs that are playing in the BBL or the Southwest or the West Midlands League or even Scotland and say, okay, here's what we're going to offer you. We're going to offer you a direct contact with us, all of these support systems. That's all free. There's no catch to that. The only catch, and all the safeguarding stuff, the only catch, the only thing that you're signing up to is the safeguarding standards that we've set for the totality of the sport. And so we did that. We got to that point. Then we thought, well, hang on a second. There are all of these clubs that are inside the Baseball Federation, the BBF, inside the BSF, who are affiliated to them. And what do we do with them in the charter? And actually, in many ways, the charter doesn't change anything for them. I was having a conversation with John Falazio last week, and he said, this is all the same stuff. What's new? Dave Martin Byers asked the same question. It's like, what's new about this? And there's actually there's not a lot of fundamental new stuff in there around for the clubs that are already part of the BBF and BSF. They're already bound by the safeguarding responsibilities through their national governing bodies, membership of Baseball Soccer UK, and they already have access to the development services. But in order to have everyone in the same system, we thought a charter would be a really good thing. So we're automatically enrolling all of the federations members in the charter through their national federations membership of Baseball Soccer UK, and then asking everyone else to opt into it. So fundamentally, what that means is that we've got a common charter point across everyone in the sport. There's a common understanding of what the charter means. When you go to a local authority, if you're a chartered club, you can use the charter mark to put it on your letterhead, and the local authority will understand that you're signed up to the safeguarding and that you have the support of the National Development Agency in growing and developing the sport. So that's what the charter is, and we've just had fundamentally good traction to that. I think we're sitting at 12 clubs have chartered in 24 hours, or no, sorry, 48 hours. I don't want to overstate that. 48 hours since we launched it on Monday. 12 clubs have signed up, and obviously all of the clubs in the BBF and the BSF are already auto-enrolled, and we're expecting that Scotland's going to come in any day. There's really good traction in the West Midlands League, active discussions with the Southwest and all the others. So I'm hoping that very, very soon we'll have a almost complete set of clubs chartered to the development charter.
Yeah, lovely. After the release of the charters online, the British Baseball Federation sent out a counter message saying that they didn't agree with some of the stuff that was in it. I can't remember it word for word, so I won't try and quote anything. But they pretty much distanced themselves from the charter, saying that they had no involvement in it. If anyone wants to check it out, it's the tweets are out there for people to see. It's not my place to sort of get involved in it. Have you had a chance to see what's been said, and is there any sort of response to it?
Yeah, no, I have. Just to be clear, it was, as I understand it, a response to the strategy, not to the charter.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I think we put out a counter statement which was intentionally succinct and brief, which is that we're disappointed with that because the British Baseball Federation board was consulted all the way through the strategic review. They had interviews with the consultants. They were given the chance to feed into the review, as were all of their members. And at every stage through the development of the plan, we shared the strategy with them. I think the British Baseball Federation, as the British Softball Federation, have all membership rights available to them to put board members on our board, to attend general meetings and annual general meetings, to put their points forward, and together they have 100% control over what Baseball Softball UK does. And I think that means that fundamentally their membership of Baseball Softball UK is the thing that gives them that opportunity to be engaged in the strategy and we've afforded every opportunity to them in exactly the same way as we have the British Softball Federation. And it was helpful that the British Softball Federation put out their clarity that they've had every opportunity, and it's been exactly the same opportunity to both organisations to be involved. Whether or not they've taken it up is a different question, but fundamentally, this is a strategy for the whole of British baseball and British softball together. And it's very disappointing to see that they've distanced themselves from it. But we're hopeful that it's pretty clear. There's nothing in that strategy that I think the grassroots would argue with. It's those four priorities of growing the sport, working with clubs, and making sure that the links between schools and clubs and universities and universities back to clubs is all there. Talent development and making sure it's a healthy environment, as we talked about, and making sure that the financial health and support are all good. There's nothing to argue with there. I can't see why that would not be in the best interest of British baseball and softball, and certainly nobody's told me anything otherwise. So, I think that now's really the time that we come together as a community, and now's really the time that we look forward and we can project into what we want the sport to be, because so much energy is being lost to having to deal with kind of a retrospective view, and I just really hope that the positivity around the community can really be channeled towards good and positive and productive things.
Thank you very much. So what's next?
So next, one of the hidden secrets, and it's in the strategy for those who have been smart enough to spot it, is that we are launching a facility and field fund. We haven't done the groundwork yet to set this up, so it'll be over the next 6-week sprint to set up the actual fund itself. But we're a few years ago we got some capital investment from Sport England, and we invested directly into facilities across British baseball and softball. And of note, within baseball, we put in £10,000 to Hearts to fund their outfield fencing and backstop and infields. We put £10,000 into the backstops at the London Mets in Finsbury Park. We put £5,000 to build the backstop at Leicester. We put some money into just helping get the Brighton field set back up when they first came around through John Sayers. And those grant investments, and we weren't the only people putting in. Partly what we were able to do there was get the clubs to fundraise and connect into the community. Part of those investments were really important to the clubs because they added things that are still being used. I mean, I was running past Finsbury Park the other day. The backstops are all there when Major League Baseball dropped into to Finsbury Park to kind of have a put on their big celebs and influencers day that you might have seen on social media. Yeah. All of the backstops that were co-funded by us had the MLB branding on, and that's really important to the sport. So we're introducing a fund that's will be designed to really help local clubs get what they need. And the point of this isn't lights and stadia. This is infields, mounds, installing the clay of an infield or a backstop. It may stretch towards dugouts and how you can sync those, but fundamentally it's meant to be a really easy to access scheme that clubs can say, hey, we want to relay an infield. We know it's going to cost £2,000. We raise 500 from the council. We raise 500 ourselves. Will you pick up £1,000 of it? And we'll go, yeah, there you go. And that'll be available to any chartered clubs. And the whole point of that is, that's going to reach the grassroots. And we made a commitment to invest in a number of projects. I won't tell you how many. It's in the strategy. That's your teaser. We're also putting in our own. We haven't managed to raise any capital for this from other sources, but we'll put our own money into that year on year.
Cool, thank you very much. And now to a bit that we've all been waiting for. It's the listener questions. Thank you very much for a great insight there, joining to BSUK and Stratergy. Andreas Johannes from Norwich Iceni has asked, how will BSUK ensure that grassroots baseball gets the quality of coaching needed to progress the game across the country, and what efforts are currently being taken to provide support of that nature?
Oh, that's a great question. And I love it. I mean, to my point that I made earlier in the show, I think coaching is one of the most difficult things to find. Quality coaching in British baseball, and I will particularly cite British fast pitch as well, is such a challenge. Finding people who have the knowledge and skills is not an easy thing. I think there's also another challenge, which is if we are to raise the quality of coaching in this country and in the environment, British sport has an ethos of education, has an ethos of levels of coaching, and it doesn't chime with the kind of levels, the approach that particularly North America, no, I won't say North America, Canada does have the same approach as us. The US doesn't have that same kind of, you will go through a level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 qualification. I mean, I'm still blown away that Premier League coaches are required to go through a level 5, I guess, FA coaching qualification. I'm blown away by that. We don't have the same system in the US as the US. We have a very different one. And I think one of the challenges that we have is the people most likely to have the coaching knowledge won't necessarily expect to go through a coaching qualification system. And I think, the coaching system that we've had, when I was first involved, the BBF had a 3-level coaching system that was reworked and reworked and reworked. Since Baseball Softball UK's had the same, we've reworked that. We've really concentrated of late on an activator course to try and make it, to try and put on a coaching qualification that is fundamentally aimed at giving the beginner a really awesome experience. And by that, it's fun, it's engaging, it's less technical, but it's the thing that you don't walk away from. And the thing that if you do walk away from, you're really kind of coming back and going, I want more of that. And that's the point of the activator course. I think we're going through one of our sprints, and Liz Knight, who's on our staff, a former baseball player. She often gets mistaken as only a softball player because, let's face it, that's the stereotype that a lot of people fall into.
Yeah.
But no, Liz played baseball. She played fast pitch. She played slow pitch. She's technically overseeing a lot of the work of the rewrite of some of our coaching qualifications. We have the Coach Summit that we've been running year on year, that we quite heavily subsidize and bring in speakers from across the world with multiple different partnerships with ISG, who are fantastic, the International Sports Group, provide clinicians. We've had really fantastic speakers. If you want any more information, please go to our website on that. That's been a really good kind of coaching experience at the end of January for both baseball and softball together. And we also have a coach license and a scheme as well, where we're providing insurance and that assurance through the DBS check and the compliance side of things as well. And I think that the way that we will help clubs develop their coaching is as part of that relationship manager discussion. We will sit down with clubs and say, okay, so what are your priorities? Well, we want to get to 60 members. Okay, do you have enough coaches for 60 members? No, we don't. Okay, so if we can bring a course to you, then how will that help? Can you find the coaches? No, we can't. Okay, can we find other sports who might have coaches who will translate? We've also made particular efforts to recognize past experience within the qualification. So that recognition process is really important to be able to maintain a standard of qualification that is aligned to the coaching framework, the UK coaching framework, and being able to take that prior knowledge and prior learning and say, how does that translate? Well, okay, you don't need a technical course. We might need to catch you up on your safeguarding requirements or how you are a responsible coach. Really helps streamline that. We've done that with some really high level people who've coached in world championships and that sort of thing recently for youth teams, and we've RFP'd them through the coaching qualification system. So again, if you've got that experience, we can walk you through that. But coaching is really important, and the more that coaches, and particularly those that think they already know everything about the sport, engage with coaching, the better.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Brian, sorry, I have one other point, Matt. Sorry.
Yeah,
I think COVID will change us. COVID-19, we've become a lot more familiar with this on-screen engagement. And I think the ability to run multiple different easy-to-access coaching courses from your living room, I think will fundamentally help this as well. So I think watch the space. I think there'll be certainly some changes and some advancements, but also we can help. We can help with the coaching programs and getting courses set up and driving that forward.
Excellent, lovely, thank you. Brian Dodds, what is BSUK doing to promote grassroots baseball, and what investment is being made to improve baseball infrastructure throughout the UK?
Yeah, so I mean, baseball infrastructure throughout the UK. I'm assuming, Brian, you mean the facility investment and how we improve it. Um, I think we always said at the beginning that in building Farnham Park and going through a facility strategy, that if Farnham Park was the only thing that came out of our facility strategy and the only piece of infrastructure that we were able to affect positively for British baseball and softball, that we hadn't done a good enough job. And we stand by that. The idea of having a single location that you can call home is good, but it's not good enough to meet the infrastructure needs across baseball. And I think there's a real challenge within baseball. Unlike slow pitch softball, where you can put lines on a grass field and bases down and play, baseball requires technical facility advancements. You have to locate a field that's yours. You have to put up a backstop, ideally permanently, that might require planning permission. You need a surface that's good enough for a small ball sport. And I think that challenge is really, it can be a barrier. And you see how much of a barrier it is by how brilliantly and ingeniously clubs are responding to this with workarounds. You see scaffolding poles put up to put up backstops. You see mounds being built out of various different things. And I think one of the biggest things we can do is the field grant scheme that I was talking about, to actually create the scheme and fundraise into that scheme. So we've got ready-made technical solutions that standardize a bit of that, so that when a Newcastle's setting up or Derby's setting up, we can say, oh, you're a new club. What do you need? Well, we need an infield. We need a backstop. Okay, let's do this. Let's build it in this way. We've got a supplier that can come in and cut your infield in. Maybe instead of us giving you money, we can do a bit of fundraising together. We talk to the council and we'll just pay the supplier to come in and do that work for you, so you don't even have to find the volunteers. So there are different ways that we can do this in economies of scale. I think what will be telling is if people in a few years turn around and recognize that we've had our hand around and supporting those kind of local facility infrastructure pieces. I'm not going to shy away from one of my regrets, and I think I was checking out what some of the questions coming up might be on social media, so I might know some of the questions coming out. But one of the questions I think might be around regrets and kind of, do I have any regrets? I have one piece of particularly unfinished business, and that's around another kind of Farnham Park-like infrastructure piece. I went on record a few years ago saying we're committed to building a facility for baseball and softball in Manchester, identifying the Hough End facility that's in South Manchester as a location for that. And I stand by that as an intention, but it's not yet realised. We are continuing to work with the Football Association, with the local authority, Greater Manchester, with Greater Sport, the County Sports Partnership, to realise it. And it's a slow project because of the complexities of it. And I think that the expectations around facility projects like this, particularly when they're so big, need to be tempered. These are not things that happen overnight. Even Farnham Park, while the journey between us deciding that we were going to write a facility strategy and building the first phase of Farnham Park was probably 4 years, that's exceptionally quick. We had another project at Northwick Park this is up in Harrow, northwest London, where we wanted to do a similar kind of project in the early 2000s, and that just didn't happen. We raised only some of the funds. Big infrastructure pieces are really complex, and I think my appeal to the community is to be reasonable about their expectations when we're trying to drive things forward. That's for a reason, and sometimes we might create a bit of hype in order for the parties to get involved and excited by this, but sometimes that hype becomes bogged down in difficulties. So yeah, in terms of the infrastructure, I think we need more facilities that are like Farnham Park, that are long-term secured. We've got 25-year lease on Farnham Park. We need to extend that up to 50 years. How do we find facilities where we can get long-term tenure? How do we work with Bristol to build what they see as their own mini Farnham Park? And had a conversation with them earlier this week. How do we work with the London Mets, who are having a capacity problem because they've got one of the best located fields, but also smallest fields in all of British baseball, and then they've got too much demand. How do we find? How do we regenerate and help what's the word I'm looking for? How do we help the facility up at Enfield that's been played on since the 80s in British baseball? How do we get that back up to scratch? How do we make sure that they're that's what we want to do, and that's what we will work with the clubs, the charter clubs, to achieve throughout our facility project. There were two parts to that question. What was the first part, Matt?
It was, what is BSUK doing to promote grassroots baseball, and what investment is being made to improve baseball infrastructure throughout the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I think the promoting grassroots baseball is our commitment to work with baseball clubs on the ground to do that. And I think that the reason that I'm focusing on that is because it won't be us that bring the next players to the field directly. I mean, if our staff, whether they're located in the London office or in their own homes across the country, are not going to be the people on the ground. So what we can do is we can make sure that the local organisations are ready to receive them. The RFU, when they hosted the Rugby World Cup a few years ago, set up a number of different club initiatives. And fundamentally what they learned from that was there was this huge influx of players into the club structure, but the club structure wasn't ready to receive them. And they saw the boom, and bust is too strong a word, but lots of players moving away. Fundamentally, what we're trying to do is build the infrastructure so when people get there, it's a really good quality experience. And we can't do more than that. We know, and this is not our stat, this is the government's, there are 200,000 teenagers playing baseball and softball in schools in some shape, form, or another. You know, they might have wooden bats, tennis balls, and 3 gloves between them.
Yeah.
But they're playing some form of that. What we need to make sure is there's a link between the school and the club, and that when people come to that club, they're having a really good experience. And fundamentally, that's the best thing we can do to promote grassroots baseball.
Lovely, thank you. Kieran Peskett has asked, what is BSUK's response to the BFF comments regarding the recently announced strategic plan? It does appear that BSUK and the BFF have a good working relationship. And what steps are BSUK taking to address this?
Well, I think I covered the response to the strategic plan earlier in the show. So if you don't mind, I think I'm going to just kind of talk about the working relationship. I mean, actually, I'm not. I think it's fundamentally my starting point. I don't think it's in anyone's interest to air our dirty laundry as a sport, or for Baseball Softball UK to do anything but act in the best interest of both of our members together through the sport. I think the important thing really is that we have 2 sports, we have 3 formats, we have leagues spread across the country in baseball and in slow pitch and in fast pitch. We have so many different connections, whether it's university baseball and softball, whether it's the youth play that's happening and came through some of the fun at bat programs. There's just a real spread of the sport, and I'm hoping that the totality of the sport can really kind of come together and concentrate its efforts on something positive, as I said earlier. I think in terms of BDO, I do want to pick that up, actually. You know, there have been a handful of people, possibly fewer people than I expected, but a handful of people who have kind of been in touch and said, okay, the BBF said we should ask for this, you know, smoking gun of a report that's the BDO report. And I just want to address it because I'm sure a lot of your listeners don't know what BDO is, what a report is. They're kind of interested in.
There's quite a few questions about the BDO. There's quite a lot of people that message, and I'm not really familiar what the BDO is, apart from I know it was an audit of some sort, but that's literally as much as I really know about it. Yeah.
So I think the best way to describe what the BDO report is to just give a little bit of background information. Last year, Baseball Softball UK turned over about 1.1 million, just under 1.1 million pounds. Of that, we got a core grant from Sport England that was under half of that. And we raised the rest of the money through other sources, some other grant schemes, etc. When we turn over that kind of level of Sport England grant money and other money, it's incumbent on us to be audited financially every year, which we have. We have auditors that are appointed by our members at our annual general meeting every year. And as a part of that, and in receipt of both exchequer, which means money from the public purse, and lottery funds, Sport England and UK Sport have the right to commission audits. the BDO audits are, BDO is a city firm that does financial and governance audits on companies, and they were appointed by Sport England last year to audit all sports that are in receipt of public funding. And every sport that is in receipt of public funding through the national governing body stream, which we are, will be audited by BDO once every 4 years, at least. So this is a routine thing. We've been through multiple different management audits through the years, and have a clean track record that dates back to 2000 when we were first formed, particularly on the financial side. Every audit that you ever go through, and I'm not sure, Matt, if you've been through a financial audit or you've seen them in other places, but every audit will always find something wrong, because otherwise you turn around and go, well, if they couldn't find something wrong, are they really doing their job properly? So the BDO audits were commissioned last year, and they did have some findings, and they had some really interesting things and helpful things to reflect, which I'll come on to in a second. But fundamentally, what BDO is a due diligence process that Sport England goes through to make sure that the funds they're putting into the sports are in order and properly managed, and that the governance requirements that they set through the Code of Sports Governance are being complied with. And what happened last year was we were having some problems as a board, and we asked for BDO to come in and audit us. It was on our request. And as a part of that, we put all of the information that we had as an organization, all of our financial policies, procedures, all of our financial books, all of our governance procedures, all of the minutes of our meetings in front of BDO. They were in our office for weeks on end, sitting right next to me, hearing every conversation. We've got this fairly dinky office in the House of Sport in London where you can hear everything. There were multiple different interviews with me, with Tim Stride, our head of operations, our governance team, our development team, the whole staff. They sat in on staff meetings. They did all of that, and we opened it up totally to them through both the finance and governance audit, and we were totally transparent in that. There wasn't a question that we weren't prepared to audit, and were commended on that transparency. It's always been one of the things that we've been determined to do when audited, which is to be honest and open to Sport England. They're our primary funders, and it's critical to our ongoing relationship with Sport England that we're open and honest and transparent with them. And we didn't hide a thing from BDO. The outcome of the BDO report was not unsurprising in any regard. They found that our finances were in some areas good and meeting standards. There were some recommendations about our financial controls. They reflected some of the comments that our financial auditors, our year-on-year auditors have said, and we have an action plan that's being delivered. No concern there. It's a green traffic light in the RAG rating system. On the governance front, unsurprisingly, they found that our governance was not meeting standards. And the key things that they found around our governance not meeting standards, which was what triggered this request in the first place from us, come in and have a look at this, was that our board, which at the time of BDO reviewing this had reduced down to 3 members. Our board didn't have enough people on it, and there was a problem with getting people on our board, and that we needed to rectify that. The observations that I said at the beginning of this are around the strategy. We need a strategy. It needs to be documented. It needs to be owned by the board, and that the board needed to have a proactive and positive stakeholder engagement plan around how we work with our stakeholders. And our stakeholders are Major League Baseball, Sport England, the British Baseball Federation, the British Softball Federation, the Youth Sport Trust, the British Olympic Association, all of them. And that we need to get ahead of that so that there wasn't any disunity or disjuncture between that. And really on the back of those BDO reports, which were concluded by March this year with an action plan signed off by us and by Sport England, it's a document that is between us and Sport England. Every sport gets this. None of them publish the reports in full. They're not public facing. And partly the reason why they're not public facing is because they contain some sensitive information in there, information about how we do our various different procedures, what we need to work on, and contains information about our relationships as well. And I think fundamentally, that's the reason that we aren't going to publish the BDO reports. We have given it to both of our members, to the BBF and to the BSF. under the confidentiality that you would expect that we would have in place with our members. But there's really no smoking gun there, and it's resulted in a robust action plan that our board is working to. We've managed to repopulate our board. We're up at 9 board directors, 7 of which are independent. They're all really skilled people, from people who run PR and the kind of crisis management for major firms such as, or ran it for Boeing and the like, to heads of governance and risk for city banks who eat, finances for breakfast, through to, some of the best sports marketeers. So we've got a really skilled board and a really unified board now that's got a clear action plan. And I think the bottom line on all this BDO stuff that should give everyone confidence that it's not an issue in terms of the wider scheme of things is that there have been 2 positive outcomes from Sport England who have agreed to invest in us subsequent to the BDO response. 2 major ones, including an offer to extend our funding through March 2022. That's our core funding. There are definitely, Sport England wants the action plans to be fulfilled and for the stakeholder plans to be in place and for the governance plan to be delivered. But fundamentally, they wouldn't have taken those decisions to continue to invest in us if there was a smoking gun there. Yeah. So I do want to reassure the community that this is a distraction from what we should be looking at, and it's a distraction from what should be a very positive week of looking at a common plan that we can all get behind, and the kind of next steps around facility development and around growing the participation in our sport.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. Some of the other BDO stuff that was mentioned as well. We've got like Brian, Kieran, Edward, and there's a few others. I'm sorry if I've missed your name off the list. Was about the availability of the BDO report, but you said then it's not a publicly available document. Is there like a censored version without, like you see in spy films with black lines covered across it? Is it?
Oh yeah, redacted. Yeah.
Yeah. Is so, there anything like that people can see, or is it just a no-go?
Yeah, so the unusual thing is that we're the only sport that is looking for a public-facing document, if you like, and BDO has not published that because they report directly to Sport England on this. I liken this to an Ofsted report. You get an outcome that you can know about the school, but you wouldn't find out if such and such a teacher was underperforming in such and such a class. You get the outcome and you get the action points. And I think fundamentally that's where this is. I have raised with Sport England, hey, we're going through this. This is not a public-facing document as it is. Is there a way that BDO could provide a summary? But I mean, I dread to think what Sport England's paying BDO to do these reviews in the first place. I'm not sure that Sport England is particularly interested in investing more in that just to placate a few people within one of the sports that it funds. And I think that's the bottom line on this. But I'm more than happy to have a conversation, particularly with those people that are involved in the running of clubs, and I'm more than happy to discuss this if the explanation I've just given isn't sufficient to anyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question that came through was, what are you most proud of that BSUK has achieved, and what one thing would you wish you'd done better?
Good questions.
Apologies to whoever sent that one in, but my sorry.
No, I love the questions because it puts me on the spot. The thing I wish I would have done better, I think I've covered in a way. I'm still really disappointed that the Manchester facility hasn't come off. I think the viability of that, having a second facility, and the vision I had of this Manchester facility is awesome. I'm not sure it's all there and plausible, but have you been to the Manchester Hough End playing fields, Matt? Kind of close enough. You might have been down there.
No,
there's Broughton Park.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Broughton Park Rugby Club, and there's a really nice floodlit rugby club there, and they're expansive grass fields, and there's a police club that the Softball Federation's had its meetings at, and I think this vision of a field, a kind of a baseball softball combo like we have, where you can use it for both sports, and and a youth baseball and a softball field that could be used. So kind of like one of each field from Farnham Park there, with the police club that has a weights training and an indoor facility and a social space. It really captured my imagination about being able to have some really kind of awesome facilities for the playing community up there. So that's one thing. I think there's a missed opportunity in the vibrancy of the Bristol baseball and softball community is really strong, and thinking about a facility there or in the kind of Nottingham surrounds areas is really helpful. And for Bristol, that's the biggest playing community in baseball and softball outside of London. They've got multiple different softball leagues. They've got a strong baseball setup, and that for me is a real opportunity. And I think that's where I think there's an opportunity in terms of the things I'm proud of. I'm really proud of what Baseball Softball UK has done for the sports. I think bringing baseball and softball together, and if you don't look at this from just a baseball perspective, you look at it from a baseball, softball, and community perspective, I think you start seeing where we've made real inroads. We have really strong connections with the school games. We have university. God, I never thought I'd see this. The university endorsement through the Bucks program for both baseball and softball. That was something I was working on when I was 20 and green in the tooth, first joining the BBF board, and so many other people have worked on since me. John Irving and Luke Stott did a great blog on it, and other people to get there. That's been such a team effort. That I'm really proud of our part in it. And again, I'm not saying that's purely down to us, but the influence that we brought. And there's just so many things like that. And I'm proud of how we presented the sports together. I love Farnham Park. It's got a long way to go to be the facility it deserves to be, but I can remember days when we didn't have a national facility. And the last one I'd cite is a little side project, which was going after investment from Sport England into our talent program. That was something that I was determined that we were able to do, and to try and bring some investment into the academy and the high performance academy. And it's not a lot of money. It's 40-odd thousand pounds a year from Sport England, but it helps subsidise the high performance academy in the academy. It helps pay the costs of coaches getting around the country and making sure that the coaches that are involved in that, particularly the lead coaches, get some kind of honorarium. It helps pay for facility hire, which is so expensive. But most of all, the players that we've seen come through that, and the players that then have gone on to get the sports aid funding or the Backing the Best funding, again, which we were able to secure from the sports, those are huge, and those are really kind of impactful things. So I'm sorry I don't have a more concise one. I'm very proud of a lot of the things that we've done. I get a buzz when I run past Finsbury Park and see the backstops, and I get a buzz from seeing the places that we've had an impact. And yeah, it's a really great organization to be a part of. But fundamentally, the best people you could wish to have on your team, and just very proud of all of that.
Cracking, thank you. Edward's also asked, he asked a couple of questions. What are the plans, if any, as it's not been listed as a priority, to develop baseball umpiring in the strategic plan?
Well, I've got a nod to them here. If anyone was wondering what was behind me, it's 3 baseball umpires from, I guess, the 1950s, seeing, I think it's COVID coming down from the sky, wearing their face masks for the time being. Look, umpiring is always a question that comes up, and I had a conversation with one of our LGBTQ plus panel members, Tom Hayward, who's a baseball umpire, about this. And Tom's been brilliant on the panel, and he's also been a great advocate of baseball in Scotland and across the UK and Europe. And he raised the question to me. He said, "You're missing a trick here. And it's not just umpiring; it's also officiating and scoring as well." And I agree with him. I think it's really hard to run a good, solid baseball club if you don't have umpires, and if you have umpires who are not confident in their abilities, and maybe who lose your confidence in their abilities. And to the point, and you asked the question about, have I applied stuff of what I've learned? the reason I was calling everyone in that BBF handbook was to see if anyone would be willing to umpire my youth games, because I didn't have anyone. So I get it. I think the difficulty right now is it's not a delegated responsibility to Baseball Soccer UK. It remains the responsibility of the BBF and the BSF within their domains. It's one of those areas that we're supposed to be working together and they're supposed to consult with us on. And I welcome those kind of active discussions with umpiring within the two sports. Within the BBF, I think Gabor's been doing a fantastic job of making sure that umpiring's been lifted and kind of educated and connected through the webinars. And I think that's great. Within softball, BSU is so competent in the development of umpires that there's only probably stuff around the edges that we could do. But I'm certainly open to figuring out ways of kind of like the development charter, finding ways to help fundraise, to provide support, to connect into organisations like Sports Officials UK. We introduced the BBF to a few years ago and got them in membership of. So yeah, I think there are ways that we can do that. But yeah, it's not going to be a core responsibility, but it definitely matters, and we're happy to add our weight where we can.
Thank you very much. How are the results from previous funding cycles collated and fact-checked?
Fact-checked, yeah, okay. So every sport funding typically works on a 4-year period. We're talking about in this instance, there are two main 4-year cycle organisations. UK Sport, who fund the Olympic and national team kind of setup, but they typically only fund the Olympic medal hopes. I'll come back to them in a second. And Sport England, who fund grassroots sport in England. Unfortunately, Sport Scotland doesn't have the same kind of grassroots sport approach, and we're working with Paul Convoy and with the Scottish softball setup to try and have a proper engagement with Scotland. But fundamentally, it's about Sport England and UK Sport. Yeah. Typically, what happens is you put in a funding application. That funding application sets a number of kind of key performance measures, outcomes, and you are tracked on a half-yearly basis through the delivery of those outcomes. And there's a tracker. We sit down with Sport England and UK Sport on a half-yearly basis. They ask how we're progressing. We tell them, we show them, and they verify that information is sufficient. Both of those organisations are National Audit Office audited. They have very strict policies and procedures. And our whole system has to kind of go through a process to be verified as proper use of money and in line with that. Our auditors also, our financial auditors also go through the proper use check, which is we're using the funds for what they were given for. So all of that's done, and it's done on a continual basis. So when we turn around and we say these are the measures that we're going to do, we agree them with Sport England. Our participation measure is a key one of those. And we deliver against it. And if we don't deliver against it, we have to explain why and what we're going to do to rectify it. And they have the option to pull back funding. And to this point, they have never taken back funding or defunded us in any of the areas. And that does, it sounds like a negative, but it does speak volumes. Almost, I can name a lot of other sports that have had problems with their funding through the years, and we just haven't been one of them. So that's really crucial. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Are there any comments on why the two fields at Farnham Park are woefully underused by baseball? And if cost is cited, why are the field hire prices so restrictive?
Yeah. So I get this question a lot, and I do understand it, and I think, look, from my perspective, I think there are two parts to this. The first one is if you hear that hiring a baseball field is £200 a day, you sit there going, oh, that's £200 a day. And I get that can feel like a lot. It kind of goes back to, is a £5 pint cheap or expensive? Last night I paid £6.20 for one in London. If, it's a £5 pint cheaper or expensive in Salford, it's expensive, right?
Yeah.
Different tolerance levels. Yeah, okay. There are different tolerance levels, there are different kind of perceptions to this. And when we were setting up Farnham Park, we went to some of the local organisations and they said, well, we pay £200 for that grass field over there per year. So you're charging £200 there, we can get that for £200. Like, yeah, you can. But we built a field with no investment at all from the grassroots of the sport. We didn't go cap in hand to each of the organisations. We built a £600,000 facility, and all we're asking you to do is pay £200 towards an infield, sunken dugouts, a permanent outfield fence that has warning tracks, a proper height backstop, etc. So that, look, I'm not dismissing that it might feel expensive to some. But I think it needs to be the focus of that needs to be borne in mind. And what we were trying to do with this wasn't create a club facility. It's ideal if we can get a club based in there, and we tried with the Farm Park Baseball and Softball Club, and we will continue to try and get a club based there. But it's basically supposed to be the national centre, the national home of British baseball and softball, and it's supposed to be used for national championships and for showcase games and for when GB plays, and that's the point of the facility. So part of our pricing point has been to mark to that. But fundamentally, we're a not-for-profit. Farnham Park is heavily still subsidised by Baseball Softball UK. The staffing costs around the administration of it are still picked up by Baseball Softball UK. So it's losing year on year 10, 20s and 30s of thousands of pounds still. And what we're doing is any money that is charged for the fields gets recycled in. So when softball tournaments come in and hire all of the fields, including the corners of the baseball fields, that's putting money and substantial money back into help the staffing of it and the upkeep of the facility. Yeah. When the softball tournaments come in, and this is part of the question about that balance between baseball and softball, and have big parties on Friday nights and Saturday nights, we're getting thousands of pounds put back into the running of the Farnham Park facility by those parties. And I think there needs to be an appreciation, and this is where I get a little bit lectury, from baseball, that a lot of what softball does on the site helps make the site, baseball and softball, the quality that it is. Is it a good enough quality yet? No, it needs to get better. It's a very good quality facility, but it needs to get better. And we can only do that when everyone understands that has to come with an appropriate kind of contribution. Just to also point out, we did an analysis last year of the kind of usage. So slow pitch softball used the site 46% of the time. Baseball used the site 40% of the time, and there was 14% of the time used for fast pitch. So when you look at it across the formats, which was designed for the three formats, there's pretty extensive use there. And I think what we've seen actually in lockdown and coming out of lockdown, the easing of lockdown, is we're operating at very high levels of capacity, and so many baseball clubs are backing up and running, and with a lot more baseballs being played right now than softball on the site. And we've also dropped the rate to help encourage people to get back and keep their habits to £30 an hour, which is dirt cheap. So, I think fundamentally what we've been doing is just trying to facilitate, and that's a special one-off, don't quote me on it kind of deal, but we're trying to encourage people to get back and playing in the sport, but also ask for a bit of understanding and appreciation for what we're trying to do with Farnham Park.
Thank you. Paul Stewart, I'm guessing he's a mate of yours. How come you went 1-4 against me? I'm guessing there's a story there.
0 for 4 against Paul Stewart. First of all, prove it, mate. Second of all, the thing you need to know about Paul Stewart is he is at least 25 years older than me. So when I was facing him, he must have been in his late 30s. Yes, that probably, maybe early 40s even. And the thing I struggled with hitting against it, sorry, the other thing you need to know is he's left-handed and very funky. And the thing you need to know about him is he hitting off him is, for me, the same as playing golf. The ball's just sitting there going, hit me, hit me, hit me, and I will swing and miss it. But I have never swung and missed 4 golf balls in a row, and I've definitely never swung and missed 4 of Paul Stewart's pitches in a row. Paul, if you're listening, this is laying it out. You're a captain of a very lush golf club in Surrey. How about a society day to fundraise for some of our facility schemes or our talent program? There's the challenge.
Willington, lovely Willington, has asked, there have historically been some amazing youth programs run by BSUK in partnership with Major League Baseball and the British Baseball Federation. Pitch hit and run in schools, play ball in communities, and the Envoy Coach program that brought US coaches to UK during the summer. What plans are there in place to bring any of these back, and what will BSUK do differently to ensure the success is sustained beyond the lifetime of the program?
Yeah. So look, Major League Baseball needs to speak for themselves. I can talk to what we're doing and how we're working to support Major League Baseball's efforts, but it's really down to them to release their plans and talk about it. I think there is a difference between the Major League Baseball now and the Major League Baseball that did all of those things. The Major League Baseball of the past was much more like the ethos that Baseball Softball UK has tried to carry on, but without Major League Baseball's financial resource, which is around sports development in its totality, understanding that getting kids playing in effectively the play ball program was a little league kind of setup, a little league like program where you could have a local league and get it going. And in fact, the program that Jonathan Craman and Liam Morrison and a number of others came through in the London Mets and was set up under the London Meteors as a play ball program, and that was very much an ethos of Major League Baseball at the time. I think Major League Baseball's evolved and become much more around a kind of marketeer, and I mean this in the most positive sense, a powerhouse in marketing and reaching new audiences. Some of what we saw at the Finsbury Park, their Influencers Day on social media, was they're getting celebrities involved and they're trying to engage a community that we haven't got access to. As our former chair, John Walmsley, would say, yeah, okay, maybe there are 25,000, 26,000 people playing baseball and softball regularly in teams. Maybe there are 200,000 kids in schools. But what about the other 60 million people in this country? And I think fundamentally that's what Major League Baseball is speaking to right now. And I think they're doing that with the food fest and the kind of even the battlegrounds where they took over the 4th of July festival, the summertime festival in Hyde Park. It's just very different, and it's inspiring and exciting. But we are also talking to them about what some of those things that we can leave behind are, and we're licensed to run the Fun at Bat program, which is a school program developed by USA Baseball and Major League Baseball, and it's a schools program for baseball and softball. It's a really good entry level. We're talking to them about how we make sure it keeps going post-COVID. We're making sure that we're having discussions about how we can extend schools programs across the country. We would love to see some kind of further kind of development of the club structure and the facility structure. And, I think Major League Baseball is committed to being here and being in this market. The UK is a priority market for them and will continue to be for the next decade. So the key thing is how financially they can ride through the challenges that this year has brought, and how we make sure that we've got robust programs that link to clubs, that link to universities, that link to schools, and link all of them together. And that's very much where we've been in terms of our discussions with Major League Baseball, and I'm very happy to say that they're very much on the same page as us.
Yeah. Another question is coming from John. It appears baseball hasn't grown over the last number of years. What could BSUK do better to address this? So
I think the key things around the growth of baseball is understanding that not everyone will want to play in a club home and away setup. Not everyone will want to travel from Guildford to Plymouth to play a game. That's not a viable scenario. So we have to come up with new structures, and we have to come up with new ways of doing things. And I think that can happen on different axes. I think the first axis is, can you do more localized stuff? Can you have pickup games? There's some discussion about some pickup games, and we get some of those games going at Farnham Park, and we'd love to help support that. There, clubs that I think the London Mets have done 4 balls as a Heart. There are lots of different ways you can make it really accessible, but I think fundamentally baseball needs to understand that traveling for 2 hours, getting to a field, warming up for 2 hours, playing 2 very long games of a double header that have multiple different walks and high scoring experiences, and then driving home, or worse, instead of driving, instead of spending all their time setting up a field, it's really difficult to keep people's passion going through. And I think that means we have to energize the sport a bit. We have to look at different ways of presenting ourselves and getting people access to it. So I think fundamentally it's about making sure that the experience that everyone has is really good. And I think clubs have a vital role of doing that. I think we've also seen a lot of clubs grow, form, and fold. And I think from our side, we can help those clubs form, as I've detailed in the kind of charter stuff, help them stay when they're having trouble, which I've detailed in the charter stuff. And sometimes where we can see them and spot the crisis, we might be able to bring them back from the brink. And we've done that a few times. And we've really helped a number of different clubs over different ages. A prime example of that is the kind of demise and then the reclimb of Croydon Pirates and that sort of thing. And we've been there, and I'm not taking credit for whether or not they reformed, but we've been there supporting them all the way through the journey. I think the rest of the community also has a role to play there. Each of us can do what people did for me when I was setting up Windsor. How can I help? What can I do? Okay, I can be there. And I think that's crucial. I also think there's a way that by seeing ourselves as one community, we can see a real kind of a development of and a celebration of people playing the sports, whether it's baseball or fast pitch or slow pitch. And one of the things that I was awesome, actually, this might be one of my favorite highlights of this year, was seeing how many volunteers came out from across baseball and the slow pitch and the fast pitch community to volunteer at Farnham Park at a very social distance way to make sure that the facility was kept up to scratch. And they just gave their time. That's the sort of thing that can come out of a vibrant embracing of the communities together and going, yes, baseball has its place here and it's brilliant, but let's also celebrate baseball, fast pitch and slow pitch. And, we're seeing more and more baseball and softball clubs, whether it's Chichester Softball and Baseball Club or Bracknell Baseball and Softball Club or Guildford, or there's so many clubs that are coming out that are doing the two sports. And the more that you can embrace that, the more, and I hate to say this, the more you can move away from a kind of white male to the 25 to 40-year-old demographic, and you can build that out to include women, to include people from BAME backgrounds, to include the LGBT community, to include just making sure that we can include people who have disabilities, whether it's learning or hearing, which we have a lot of. That's where the vibrancy of the sport comes from. It doesn't just sit there going, well, we can't get anyone because. So I think it's fundamentally about pulling together on that and embracing the opportunities that are out there.
Awesome, thank you. How do you work with federations on development? We touched on some of that throughout the shows. Anything you'd like to expand on?
Yeah, so for development, we created the strategy. We've seen the strategy. We consult with them. We lay out a number of the different priorities, and then we go and try and get some money from government to help do that. And when we get money from government, that helps us. It's kind of like the extra supercharged areas of work, and we then go and deliver that. And we offer both of the federations the opportunity to put up to 2 board members on our board to come and sit with us multiple different times during the year at general meetings. We have asked both organisations what their development plans are and their strategic priorities, and where those are provided, which they're often not, we incorporate those into what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, how is the Sport England money spent, and what will you do if no money is forthcoming from Sport England? Over to
so the great news, exactly. And the great news is Sport England's extended our funding through March 2022. They're implementing a new strategy, and they want to make sure that all sports are applying in line with that. And we will, position our strategy ourselves in line with the Sport England stuff to have the best possible chance of continuing to be invested in. Sport England invests in three streams of funding for us. Talent, which is, if you forgive me, I'm just going to look it up, about £40,000 a year. So talent is about £40,000 a year that they put in, and then we go out and get some extra funds. This current year it's 38,750. They put in £189,000 into back office, and what that covers is our safeguarding function, our finance, the intersection with Sport England, the management, the responsibilities that we have, our governance, and contributes to our office. And then they also put in £298,000 to the development of the sport, which goes on our development staff. As I talked about, we're a human resource as much as a physical and practical resource, and also to our development programming. That all adds up to 525,750. Did you do your maths?
Yes. I wasn't keeping count.
And then through that, yeah, exactly. And then through that, we're able to go out and get other grant money, generate some income from our other streams, and that all then pulls us up to the operating on normal years, not this year, pulls us up to about the 1.1 million turnover point.
Cool, thank you. As a development agency, how do federations judge you on your successes?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, look, when you sit down over a 4-year period and you write a plan, that's what you get judged against. And I think the key point here is that we're a 2-member organization, and as a 2-member organization, it's often like a marriage, right? Both organizations need to agree in order to have forward progress, and if one doesn't agree, it can stymie that forward progress. But fundamentally, I think what governs us as an organization is that we are baseball and softball together, and that our interests are always to operate in the best interest of the sports together. It's not that one has more influence over the other. And fundamentally, the board's responsibility is to make sure that there is a robust, well consulted on plan that has a basis, that has a line of sight to talking to the members, to talking to the playing population. And that when we do that, we've also got the measures in place that we're performing to, and that's then the opportunity to actively discuss that with us is there for either of the members, which we've continued to do. There's this floating out there idea that the board doesn't want to meet with either of the members, and that's just nonsense. And so I think that fundamentally, that's what we're about, and that's how we get judged. If one member wasn't happy with that, then and the other member was, then there needs to be an active debate. But I think fundamentally, we have delivered against our strategies. Sport England's happy with that. The members have never kind of given us any reason to think that they're unhappy with that. So, I think fundamentally that's the key point here.
Lovely, thank you. Last question from listener questions now. The perception is softball gets pushed more than baseball. How could you address fears this is not the case?
Well, so you cut me, I bleed baseball and softball in equal measures, and so do the staff team, and I make sure of that. If someone comes in and they're purely softball related, they get grilled on how they will make sure. Sorry, as an application to our organisation, get grilled on how they make sure that they're equally about baseball, and vice versa. If someone comes in that's a baseball guy or a baseball person, or they get grilled on. How will they make sure that slow pitch and fast pitch are equally a part of this mix? I think fundamentally that there's what we call the double play effect. Earlier in the podcast, I was talking about the magazine that we set up through baseball and softball, and we were getting complaints. And we were sitting there when we first set this, when this was run by the BBF and BSF jointly before BSUK was set up, and we were getting complaints, and we were sitting there going, these complaints are coming in from softball saying that baseball's getting too many column inches, and baseball's coming in saying softball's getting too many column inches. And fundamentally, when we analyze the column inches, they were equal. And I think that double play effect has continued to roll. I'm not dismissing that perception, but I think that there's always a perception that you don't recognize and clock what matters to you so much as you clock those things that you feel are unjust. Baseball Softball UK has taken on a participation agenda. It is far easier to get people playing slow pitch softball from a beginner's standpoint than it is for playing baseball. But that doesn't mean that we care less about it or that we don't resource it. What it means is that we need to handle things in different ways. Where we've gone to work with slow pitch softball, we've worked through leagues as a whole, generally, less so the club setup. We've gone to work in the university sector on slow pitch and on baseball because that's a really big growth area. we've also tried to look at those places where it can be played much more informally. In baseball, it needs to be in a bit more of an organized structure, and that's where we've tried to work as close as we can, as this new strategy is showing with the grassroots organizations. So I think that that's all there. We've seen each of the sports in different ways grow in very similar kind of scale, rather than they haven't all grown by the same number, but the kind of percentages are pretty similar. And there certainly have been at many different points over the years. So I don't fully accept that that softball's even growing much faster than baseball. I certainly don't accept that we prioritize softball over baseball.
Cool.
Can I just sort my light out?
Yeah, I'm getting attacked by moths. I literally had one of them fly straight into my chest as we're recording. So if you watch this on YouTube and you look like I'm going doing some weird little jig, yeah, it's a moth straight at me. Brilliant. But I'm just too warm. I can't shut the window, and this is like the only light source in the room. But I'll suffer for my art. So that is all the listening questions that I've done. I like to leave the last word open to the guests. So John, any shout outs, anything you'd like to say before we part ways, and if you want to cover that we might have missed off?
Oh no, Matt, thank you so much for having me on. I mean, I think it's really odd to be in a week where you can feel positive about the sport, and you can feel this positive energy coming from so many different corners of the sport. And I think this British baseball and British softball have so much in common and so much potential. There is an open gap in the market for fun to play team summer sports that can be embracing of every person and every kind of walk of life. And when we just got to ride through that, we got to, my last message is fundamentally the one that I said earlier. I really hope that everyone gets behind this and starts looking forward and coming together on this. We'll do what we can to be a facilitator of that, and hope for everyone to kind of join together on that journey that we're all going on. So thank you for all that you're doing. It's great to see your podcast take off.
Thank you very much.
I think I listened to your first episode on the tube when we were allowed on the tube, it's really been taking off, and it's great to speak to you and see you in person.
Yeah, thank you very much. And like I said, we're trying to get you on the show for quite a while. I've been trying to know about this, starting a ball club since you're the age of 12. I don't know how long. But yeah, it's been great. Thank you very much for your time. I realise it's been a bit of a long one, but a lot of people in the British baseball community wanted to ask a lot of questions. I hope everyone out there isn't disappointed. I managed to cover everything that was discussed. John, thank you for being an open book, and thank you for sharing your stories with us. And I'll see you on the other side. Take care.
Thanks, Matt. All the best.